University in Cairo, and I'm really happy to be with you all today. So for our timetable today, we're going to discuss first what is JavaScript, because I'm pretty sure since we're presumably all of us are programmers here and we've used some coding languages before, I think we've heard the language JavaScript a lot. So we're going to get introduced to what is JavaScript. Then we're moving into different types and different ways to declare variables. Next up, we're going to have some DOM manipulation. We're going to know what the DOM is and how to change it, how to add elements, remove elements, etc. Then we're going to have the query selector. We're going to know exactly what that is. Event handling is going to be covered next. And finally, we're going to have an interactive project where we're going to do a to-do list together. All right. So starting from the beginning, what is JavaScript? So basically, JavaScript is a scripting language. All right, hold up. Before we start talking in jargon and ununderstood words. Any web application we use or any website mainly has an HTML. All right, it's written in HTML. However, HTML is the mere skeleton of the website. It just shows some maybe black text, text boxes, maybe some scroll bars. However, it's all dull and boring. All the same color, all the same shapes, no font changes, no background images, nothing. That's where the CSS comes in. Gives it some stylings, gives it some colors, font sizes, font weights, etc. However, that's not covered in today's session. But today we're going to cover JavaScript, which is basically like the nerve center of a website. JavaScript assists us to create some majorly effective and better looking and better performing projects where we can dynamically update its content. We can add and remove elements at our will. We can add some images, animate them, add some videos, some multimedia, etc. We're going to see how in a second. All right. So that out of the way, let's start with our coding session. We're going to have an index file to start our work. We're just going to have the boilerplate right here. Sorry. Right. Let's give it the VDSC title. Great. So before we start, I'd like to welcome you all to the workshop. And let's set it up. Great. So to start it, we can actually insert some JavaScript code here, which is not preferable, but I'm going to show you the other way. However, let's start with the easy one. We could simply add a script tag and just insert our code. Let's start with some basic JS. Let's have, for example, a variable. Let's name it name, and let's call it GDSC, for example. Right? Then we're gonna print it. Console.log is simply the print statement in any programming language. Yep, that infamous debugging method.
Andrew, sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Please, could you just zoom in the code because it's not visible? If you could just increase the font size, or if you could just zoom in.
I don't think. Hold up one second.
Yeah, better than before.
All right. So we're going to start with the printing statement. I mean, it was not mainly made to be used for debugging and stuff. However, we've made it so yeah, it is what it is. So let's try printing out the name. All right. I mean, nothing printed. Why is that? Because it's actually in the console. What's the console? It's simply, you'll find it in the Google Chrome browser right here in the Inspect tab. And we go into console, and there is our name. There's where the print statements go. All right. Getting in a little more advanced right there. Let's try something like the conditional algorithm, the famous if then else block. Let's try something like, I don't know, just a simple equation. 3 + 2 equals. Oh, by the way, in JavaScript, we don't write it as equal equal. It's triple equal. And for the not equal case, it's an exclamation mark and a double equal. All right. So let's, for example, start with 3 plus 2 is equal to 5. Right? This should return true. So if this is true, we want to print, for example, our calculation is correct, which we see here. Great. The else bar, the else block, I mean, it's the same. We're gonna just try something like this right here. And maybe let's tell the user to try again. And change this to, let's make it does not equal 5. Perfect. So we've covered some basic JavaScript code, just declaring a variable, printing it. We've gone over the conditional algorithm. Now we can simply go through the iterative algorithm. It's pretty close to the Java for loop, if anyone has actually written in Java before. Let's try it right now. We just declare a variable. Let's call it an I for the counter. Okay, I less than or equals 10. And we just incremented every cycle. And we're gonna print the I. Or let me show you something actually. Our counter is and plus I. Let's just move that out of the way. And there you have it. That's the for loop. All right. So one little trick that's useful in JavaScript, if you're ever gonna print, use a variable that's declared before in a print statement, you could write it in a more, let's say, professional way. You could use this symbol right here as the quotation marks and just go ahead with our counter is at, and then surround it, wrap your variable with this, a dollar sign and the curly brackets, and insert your variable name. And there you go. All right. So we've actually covered some basic JavaScript code, the basics, the conditional algorithm, and the iterative algorithm. However, where did we write our code? In a script tag in the HTML document. That's not always preferable. I mean, you can do that. However, it's not preferable to do that. So what we do is we usually create a new file specifically for JavaScript, and we link it or have it as a reference in the HTML document like this. So we could create a new file. And then in the script tag, we just the source attribute and we enter the name of our file, which take care has to be in the same directory or folder as the HTML document. All right. So let's try something. Maybe take these lines of code and paste them in the script.js file. And sure enough, there they are. So now we have a working JavaScript file that we can insert into all our JavaScript code without writing in this script tag. So usually just keep this empty. All right. So these are some basics. Great. So let's move on to something harder. Any questions till now? All right.
Guys, if you have any sort of questions, you can just type them in the chat box, or you can just turn on your mics and ask them. We'll try our best to get them resolved.
All right, thank you very much. So moving on to some higher level topic, let's discuss some variable declarations. Many of us have heard the word var, okay, the keyword var. However, that was used before ES6, which is the new version of JavaScript, was released, right? What var allows you to do is declare a variable, just like any programming language. I'm sorry. However, it can be redefined whenever you want at any point at the code. That works, it's fine. However, sometimes you need something that's more strict than that. That's where the let and const keywords come in. These were introduced with the ES6, which is a recent version of JavaScript. The difference between them is let allows you to redefine or change the variable throughout your lines of code. Maybe in a for loop, for example, maybe you just declare the variable and you're going to change it. You should use the let keyword. All right. However, with the const, it doesn't allow you to redefine or change a variable once it's declared. That makes it strict. So what would happen?
Andrew,
if,
sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
There's
sure.
a question. JavaScript is related to Java. If yes, then learning Java is necessary before learning JavaScript.
No, it's not related to Java. I said that the for loop has a similar syntax. However, they're not necessarily learned together. Mainly JavaScript is used for web development purposes, and Java is used for some maybe other projects, or some use it for server building. However, it doesn't have the same purposes as JavaScript, and they're not usually learned together.
Okay, thank you, Andrew.
You're welcome. All right, so what would happen if we declare a variable using const and then try to change it? Would it pass it? Would it just go beyond that and not change it? Would it throw an error? Let's see together. All right, so back to our code. So what we have right here is our for loop, the one we had from a little while. So as we can see with the var, declaring a variable with the var, it's working perfectly fine. Let's try changing this to the let keyword, and surprisingly, it's doing great. However, if we try changing this one to const, what would happen? Well, it just gave it the sign of 0. However, when it tried changing it, it just threw an error. I mean, how can I change something that's constant? Right? However, that's not all. Let's maybe try printing something else right here. It won't even reach this line because it just threw an error here and the whole code has stopped. That's what happens when you try changing a variable that has been declared with the const keyword. All right. Great. So yeah, these are the different variable declaration methods. So to recap real quick, we have the var, which was used before ES6. This one allows you to change the variable or not, whether it's up to you. I mean, we have the let keyword, which allows the variable to be changed once it's declared, and then we have the const keyword, which is more strict than both of these, as once a variable is declared, it cannot be changed. Const is usually used on functions too, where you don't want these functions to be altered or their functionality to be distorted or changed during the code execution. That's one purpose of using const. All right, so any questions so far? I mean, I can't see the chat, so let me...
Okay, Andrew, there's a question. If we can,
Yeah,
is
sure.
there any other language we can use instead of JavaScript?
I mean, this really depends on the purpose of what you're trying to build or what you're trying to learn. See, JavaScript is usually learned by people that want to go for the web development career. They want to build websites or maybe website servers, whether it's front end, which is the interface of a website, or the back end, which are the website servers. These people or these programmers have to learn JavaScript to even enter more dedicated and more, let me say, more effective frameworks, stuff like React and these frameworks. So it really depends on your purpose, what you're trying to achieve with learning a new programming language.
Okay, so I guess Harsh, you were satisfied with the question, with the answer. Okay, Andrew, we can move ahead.
All right. So let's move on to a more interesting topic, which is the DOM manipulation. So if you've used the JavaScript before, you've pretty much heard the word DOM a lot. However, what's that? What's a DOM manipulation? You may have used one or two or even all these functions before. However, you need to really understand what each of them does. because they can be really helpful if you understand them by heart. So the word DOM is actually an acronym. It stands for Document Object Model. I still don't get it. What's a document object model? Let's see. So on the right side of the presentation, wait, hold up, let me, yeah. On this side, we have the document, let's call it tree. I think we're all familiar with how trees work in the programming world. So at the root level, we have the document, which is basically our web page in that case. All right. Next up, we have the root element, which is the HTML, this tag right here, this one, which actually contains all of our documents, the head and the body and the script, if we're using JavaScript and this stuff. And then it actually has some children, which are the head and the body, which contain, for example, the head has the title, as here, like here, this one. Okay, and then the body has a lot of tags, like the h1 tag, the div tag, the anchor tag, these sort of elements. All right, so by manipulation, we mean changing, whether it's changing an element, altering its style, its behavior, its ID, its class, or even removing it, maybe adding a new element to the document. Let's see these. So starting off, we have the get element by ID, which is used to fetch a specific element using its ID attribute. Next up, we have the create element, which speaks for itself. It simply creates an element of like maybe an h1 tag or maybe a div tag, which has some content in it. Append child, which is used to take as an example this tree right here. We have the body element, okay, and we have this anchor tag. So if we have this anchor tag and we invoke on it append child to the body tag, it just goes in right here. It's in our document. We're gonna see this demonstrated pretty soon enough when we're done with this slide. So remove child is pretty much the opposite. It just removes an element. Inner text changes the element's text. Inner HTML, it's similar, but with a twist. We're gonna see that. Set attribute for changing some of the elements attributes, such as the class and ID. Okay, so I'm pretty sure some got lost here. However, we don't just explain programming or languages with just words. Okay, we're gonna have to see it to understand. So let's go ahead. All right. So let's start here with adding maybe a simple div tag. Let's give it an ID of div1, for example. And let's make it have the text of I am div1. So we can see it. Perfect. So in the script file, let's comment this out. Let's start with the get element by ID. Let's create a new variable. Okay, let's call it x, for example, and we would use get element by ID. And we're going to insert, it takes one parameter, which is basically a string, which represents the ID of the tag we want to fetch. So let's take the div1, right? And let's try, for example, let's see what it has. And open the console, and sure enough, there it is. Our div tag that we just created with the ID of div1. If we even hover over it, it's highlighted right there in the HTML document. Perfect. So simple. The get element by ID is simple, yet it's very useful. All right. So let's take this out. So until now, we have not manipulated the DOM by any means. We haven't changed any elements. We haven't changed any elements. We haven't added anything or removed anything. We just fetched an element. Let's get into something more interesting. So let's try, for example, adding a child node. Let's call it a child1, for example. Right, and let's create element. So for the parameters for this one, it takes a string, which is the tag name. A tag is like a div or, as we said, an anchor tag or maybe a header, these kind of tags. So let's try adding a header2 tag. It's not showing on the document. Any idea why? Someone care to tell why?
Because there is no printing statement.
I didn't catch that. Can you say it again? All right. So as we explained 2 minutes earlier, we have this document model where we have our body and we have under them, like at the children's nodes, we have our HTML tags, the H1 tags, for example. So we actually created the element, but we have not added it to the document yet. That's where this function, the append child, comes into play. Let's try it. So first off, let's give it some text, right? Let's try this inner text first. The inner text simply returns the elements text. So before doing that, let's maybe try this. Maybe try printing the previously created div tag inner text. What do we get? I am div1. Wait, so what if we try printing its inner HTML? It's the same. No, it's not. We're gonna see how. Okay, so let's get this out of the way for now. All right, so let's just change its text. Let's make it say that I'm the first child, all right? And then we're gonna add it to the document, where we're gonna use document.append child. So our problem here is that we tried appending it where? To the document itself. We do not do that. We appended the document's body, this one. That's where the HTML elements belong. So let's try here, document.body with append child, and sure enough, there it is. All right, great. Let's go further. What if we want to, okay, let's not remove it now. Let's try something else. Let's try maybe changing its ID or its class. Let's try it. So child1, that's where this function comes into play, the set attributes. It's simply used to change the elements attributes, whether these are its ID, class, maybe input type, and some other stuff in HTML. So let's try it. Set attribute simply takes two parameters, which are both strings. The first one stands for the attribute that you actually want to change, which in our case is the ID, right? And the second one is the value, what we want the ID to be named. Let's name it maybe child ID 1. All right, and let's try the same for the class as well. Let's give it a different class name. So we're gonna use it right here. And let's call it class 1. All right. So let's see these in action. Maybe let's try printing out this element and see what has it become. So let's try printing it right. Child1. All right. So as we can see right here, we can go for a better view in the elements. Where is it? Yep, there is it. So we have our H2 tag that we just created, and as you all can see, we have its ID changed to child ID1, and its class is now child C1. All right, so that's how you change an element's ID or class. By the way, set attribute, it's such a beneficial method for altering and elements attributes. So last but not least, oh wait, there is one more. So we've actually explained two functions that were pretty much the same, which were the inner text and the inner HTML. So let's try seeing the difference. So what if I try doing that? Child1.inner text, no, inner text equals new text here, or let's to make it more clear, testing inner text. Right, so it changed. Let's try maybe swapping that with HTML. And okay, let me show you the difference. So let's try something different. What if we try doing this inner text? What if we want actually to maybe add a span or a paragraph tag inside of a div tag? Let's try. So what if we add a paragraph tag? Okay, inside of there, inside the paragraph tag. What do we have here? So it just took it as a literal string. It just parsed it into a string, and there you go. It just put in the paragraph tags. But I'm sure that's not what we wanted to do. That's where the inner HTML comes into play. Let's try it right now. And okay, so it actually took the text we wanted, and if we look right here, it inserted a paragraph tag inside. So simply the difference between them is both can be used if we're dealing with just plain text with no HTML tags or elements, right? However, when trying to add a different tag, maybe inserting some text inside, maybe changing some text or something, we have to stick with the inner HTML, as the inner text just takes a string as it is and just throws it in our document, which is not what we want in some cases. All right, so now that we've covered them all, we have only one left. Last but not least, we have the remove child, I mean. So let's try this. So document body. See, we invoked it onto the body of the document, so we'll just remove it from there as well. Try remove child, and let's invoke it on child1. Sure enough, it's gone. We just removed it from the whole document. So these are some easy and beginner DOM manipulation methods. However, they're very useful to start with, and you can learn more and more as you go on with learning JavaScript. So we're done with the DOM manipulation. Any questions so far?
Oh, okay, Andrew, there's a question in the chat. How can we change the existing attribute of element as if later we want to change ID of child? It's there in the chat. You can just have a look.
I can hold up 1 second. Oh yeah, sure. You want to change the ID? Sure thing. So here we have, let's remove this one. Let's bring it back. And this one as well. So our child1 ID is child ID1. If you want an existing tag, maybe let's try this div tag. So we're gonna use, okay, wait, who asked this question? Ratan, you mind opening up your mic?
Yes, sir.
All right, so help me out. I want to fetch this div tag right there in the JavaScript to change it first. So what do I use?
Get element by ID.
Amazing. So let's try it. So var maybe, let's name it test or something, equals document dot get element by ID. And its previous ID was div1. All right. So I'll make you answer that. How do I change its ID?
By using the test variable.
All right, so what function should I invoke? Which function should I call from the ones we just explained?
set attribute.
Amazing, great. You're doing amazing. So let's try it. Maybe test.set attribute, and we're just gonna change its ID to new ID. And if you look right here, this is our imdev1. Its ID is now changed to new ID. Did that answer your question?
Yes, sir. So every time we have to change, so we have to define a variable to change that attribute.
You can do that. However, take care. They override each other. So the priority is for the HTML document. However, by the way, make sure you include the script tag at the end of the HTML document, so the document is loaded first before the JavaScript. Because if I put that up there and then try calling an element, it will just return null because the HTML is not yet loaded. So put it in the end. And for your question, yes, they overwrite each other. So the priority is for the HTML tag. First, div1 is created, which has this ID, and then because this line is executed, it references the script, and then it goes ahead and searches for any changes to this tag, finds this one, and maybe we make another change for it, and it just stays as the last one. So if we change it one more time, it will take the second change, and it will be its permanent ID. Right?
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Great. Yeah, you're welcome. Great. So now we're done with the DOM manipulation. Do we have any more questions? All right, let's move on. Great. So after the DOM manipulation, we're going to talk about the query selector. The query selector is actually a pretty useful function. It's similar to the get element by ID. However, it has some extra uses and some more, even one dare say, flexibility. There's also the query selector role, and we'll see what this exactly does. So let's try them out. So let's remove this one. Let's remove these. Or let's take this out and move it. Try duplicating this one. And name it ID. Okay, and name this one div1, div2, and div3, div4. Sorry. All right. So let's try having multiple div tags with different IDs and classes. Let's even number them from 1 to 4. And let's see exactly what the query selector does. So the query selector is actually pretty similar with the get element by ID, except the get element by ID can only fetch me an element if I give it its ID. So what if I want to actually get this element, which has a class and even no ID? One could say I could use this, the var document.get element by class name. However, let's take a look at something more generic, which is the query selector. So let's try creating a new variable. Let's name it query1 because we're going to test multiple stuff. So we're going to try right here the query selector. It has only one parameter, which is the element we're trying to fetch. So as some people know, or if you even don't know, I'm going to give it to you now. In HTML, if you want to reference, in JavaScript, if you want to reference an ID, you precede it with a hash sign, which is this one. However, if you want to fetch a class, you're going to proceed with the dot. Let's try it. So let's try, for example, selecting the div with ID 1, right? And let's show it. Let's see what it actually got. Great. So it got us the div tag with ID 1. Let's even make sure. Take a look at its text. Yep, I am ID 1, this one. Great. So one could ask, what if I use it on a class? So we're going to try it with the dot and class 1. Oh, sorry, C1. Okay, and there we have it. It returned the div with the class name class 1 with the text I am class 1. Okay, so what if we have multiple elements with the same class? What if we call this one as well class 1? Which one would it return? Let's see. It returned only I am class 1, the first one. Where's the second one? That's the thing. Query selector actually fetches the first element that it finds that satisfies its query entered in its parameter. Concentrate, this part's a tricky one. So if we have multiple elements with the same ID or the same class, the query selector, what it does is it fetches the first element it finds that satisfies this query. So if we have multiple elements, if all of these have the class C1, and we just call the query selector function with a class C1, it will just fetch or return the first one, because it just returns one HTML node or one HTML element. So what if we have multiple elements with the same class name, and I want to get a specific one? What if I want to get, for example, this one, the one that has class 3? That's where we use query selector all, because actually query selector all fetches all the elements that satisfy this criteria and returns them in the form of an array. Let's try it. So let's try var query, name it query all, document.query selector. Right, and let's give it its parameter, the class C1, right? Let's remove this. And let's see what it brought us back. So query all, and great. So it gave us actually an array of nodes, which were the our 4 div tags that have the class C1. Right, let's open even one of them, number 2, and sure enough, it has the I am class 3. Because remember, that's how arrays work in programming languages. We start with the index 0. So we have 0, 1, 2, and 3. So for the third one, we're going to go look into 2. And sure enough, we have our text, the one that we're searching for. Great, but that still did not answer my question. What if I want this div tag specifically? What do I do? Simply, as we access an index in an array in any programming language, we just add here an index. So let's try adding an index of 2. And sure enough, it brought us only one node, which, as anyone might have guessed, if we take a look at its text, it says I am class 3, which is this one. So a quick recap, the query selector works pretty much as the create element method. However, it can take, works the same as the get element by ID method. However, it can take either a class or an ID, depending on what the symbol that precedes the string is. It's a dot for the class and the hash for the ID. Right? And for not to get confused, if we have multiple elements with the same class name that we're trying to fetch, it just brings us the first one. So if you want to fetch a specific one from multiple elements having the same class or the same ID, that's where we use the query selector all, where we get an array of these elements. In JavaScript calls it a node list, right? Which is an array or a list of nodes. A node is an element. It's the same as an HTML element. All right, and to access a specific one, we just give it an index and there we have it. All right. So that's the query selector part. Anyone confused? Something to repeat?
Anyone, if you have any doubts or you wish anything to be explained again, you can just turn on your mics and ask, or you can just write it down in the chat. Anyone? Okay. Andrew, I think we should just move ahead. No one asked it.
All right then. So we're actually coming to an end. Not really, but yeah. So the next one is actually a pretty important aspect, which is the event handling. So before we start with this part, because it's important, who knows what an event is actually? Can anyone answer? Anyone? All right. So an event is basically some kind of change in a behavior, maybe in an HTML element. For example, if a button is being pressed, that's an event. If another element is being hovered over by the mouse, that's another event. If an element is changed, altered, that's another kind of event. So these are basically what events are. So what's event handling? It's the behavior of our document with respective to the event that just occurred. All right. That's where we use the event listeners. The event listeners basically are some listeners. We can call them some, maybe, I don't know, waiters that are waiting for an event to occur. Let's just stick with the button example. We have a listener somewhere defined in our document that's waiting for this specific button to get pressed, to maybe refresh the page, maybe redirect into another page. That's what event listeners are. So we're going to focus on just one event for now, one event handling method for now, which is the onClick. Let's see exactly how it works. So back to our app. Let's clear this. All right. So before we add this one, let's add a break line. And let's add another div tag, which has a counter. All right. And inside of it, we're going to define another span tag. Let's give it the ID of count, perhaps. And let's make it start with easy. So right under these, let's add another tag, which is a button. Let's give it an ID of button 1. And let's give it the value of increment. All right. So right here we have a basic counter. However, if I click this button, nothing happens. See, that's an event over there. I clicked it. That's a clicking. That's an event, an example of an event firing. However, it has no function to call. That's why no change happens in the whole document. Let's try bringing this counter to life. How are we going to do that? Let's see. So we have multiple ways of adding an event listener to an element. The most basic one is the inline way. So we just add another attribute to this button. Let's call it onClick, and let's make it call the function increment, which we're gonna create right now. So still, it does nothing. And sure enough, if I click it once more, it just said, "What's increment? You did not define a function named increment." That's what we're going to do right now. All right. So let's start off easy. So let's try, before we get on with the incremental function, let's start on what a function is. So a function, or named maybe method in some other programming languages, is simply a block of code lines that are not executed. They are only executed once you call this function, or once you trigger this function or invoke it on something else. Examples of functions are this remove child, set attribute. These are pre-made or predefined functions in JavaScript. So let's try first creating a basic function. Let's call it, for example, loop test, right? And let's make it, for example, count up to 10. So for var I equals 0, all right, and we're gonna print the counter. See it here, and sure enough, it's not even there. Why? Because as we just said, this function, the lines inside are not executed except when this function is called somewhere else, maybe invoked on another variable or something. So let's try just simply calling it. Let's try calling loop test, and sure enough, there is our counter values. So that's very, very, very briefly what a function is. All right. So let's try creating a function, which is the increment function, the one that we were trying to make. Right, so we're going to have first our counter. Fetch it from our document. Let's see, what ID did it have? This one, it had an ID of count. So let's stick that right there. And we're going to try to get the text inside of the counter by, let's name it I, and we're going to call the function parseInt, because if I just use inner text straight away, it's going to return me a 1, right? So let's see first what would happen if I call it, if I execute this function without the parseInt. So let's try document.innerText normally, and then let's increment it by 1. So can anyone guess what would happen here? Whether or not this would work? Anyone? All right. So if we try this, let's see. Nothing would happen. So I'm going to say something. Okay. So what we actually need to do is parse this into an integer. We have to, oh, I'm sorry, we forgot something. So if we try incrementing that, it just keeps adding ones. So why is that? Is that what we want? I don't think so. Don't think that's how it's intended to work. What happened here is simply we were getting the inner text of the counter, this one, which was 1. However, it just returned a text as in a string. So if we just add 1, it concatenates this string. It just adds another 1 to it, which is not what we want. So before doing anything, let's change this one into an actual integer, a number that we could use. So we're gonna use the parseInt function. This function simply changes a string into an integer. So let's try calling this one again. And sure enough, now it works as we have. Now it works as we have changed it into an integer. All right.
Okay, Andrew, I have a doubt. Can we use let instead of var while defining the counter variable?
Sure thing. If we choose this one to be a let,
Okay.
work just
And
fine.
there's one more thing I wanted to ask. Like in line number 24, you have written I plus is equal to 1. Can we use a shorthand operator over here? Like, can we write it as I plus plus?
That's right.
Will that work in JS as well?
There you have it.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right. So as we saw, that's just one way of adding an event listener for the onClick. Another type of event listener, by the way, is the on mouse over, I mean, which is the hovering. So if I change this and then come over here and just hover over this button, it changes. We have a lot of these. You can go through them and explore what everyone does. However, they all just work the same, with the only difference being the event that calls this function. So let's try another way of adding an event listener. Let's remove this from here. All right. So.
Okay, Andrew, we have a question.
Oh yeah, sure.
How many data type are available in JS? I guess that's the question.
So for sure they're not memorized. You can Google this. However, our main stuff that we use are the same, pretty much the same for the normal Java or Python. The string, integer, Boolean, maybe the float, these kind of data types. And the typecasting or changing a variable from one data type to another works pretty similar to Java too. Okay. So moving on, before calling another kind of, before trying another type of adding an event listener, we are gonna have to first bring our button over here. So let's call it button 1, and we're gonna use our get element by ID. Or let's mix things up. Let's try the query selector. All right. So now that we have our button, we have multiple ways of doing this. So first off is the simple way. Let's move this one over here. Just use one line. So we can say just button 1 dot add event listener. This one takes 2 parameters, the ones that we're interested in. The first one would be the node or the element that we want the event listener to be. I'm sorry. The first one would be the event that we want function to be called on, which is in our case the click. If we add the event listener in the JavaScript file, we do not start with on. We just remove the on keyword that was over here. We start with the click. All right. And the second parameter being the function that we're gonna call when this event happens. So let's put this increment over here. And there you have it. That's another way of adding an event listener to an HTML element. All right, so one more thing before showing you the last way, which is personally my favorite. We can just call button 1. There is our remove event listener. And it has pretty much the same parameters. We just remove the click event and we just take away its function. That way, if we try clicking that button, it does not work anymore because we just removed its listener. So it does nothing when I click it. Great, so now I'm going to show you how we can add it in a more, it may not be very pleasing to the eye at first, however, it's just more professional and it's used more often than creating a function and then calling it there. So let's comment this one out. And we're going to start with the same, add event listener, on click. This is a little more advanced, so you're not expected to get it from the first time. However, you can practice this. So we're going to use something called the arrow function, which is written in this syntax, right? That simply says that this is a function, and what it's going to do is these lines that I'm going to write. So we could take the same lines from the increment and just insert them over here. And it works the same. You just did not call the function explicitly. You just did not say increment here. You placed your whole function over here. All right.
Excuse me, Andrew.
Yeah, sure.
Just like we changed from integer to string or string to, so can we do it vice versa, like integers to string? We have changed from string to integer, I think, from %. So can we do the vice versa?
So you want to return you want to change an integer to a string. Do I understand you right? Okay, so before I answer that, what do you think? Can we?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, you used Java before?
No, I have used Python before.
Okay, so let's try what we want. So we have a var, let's name it x equals 0, right? So remember over here when we tried adding this number to a string, what happened was it was automatically parsed into a string. It was automatically parsed into a string and added, even though it was supposed to be an integer when this one was equal 1. This is a normal integer. However, when it was wanted, just JavaScript automatically typecasted it into a string and added it over there. However, in Java, we have to change this one and call a certain function called a toString, which from the name just changes the integer data type to a string data type to be used in such cases. However, JavaScript just handles it automatically. So this string just got parsed to this integer got parsed to a string and got added to our inner text before even changing it to an integer. Did I answer you?
Okay, Andrew, we have another question. That is, can you define on mouse over?
Yeah, sure. So on mouse over basically means a hovering event. Like, okay, so take a look at this button over here. So you see when it highlights itself like that, when it becomes a little darker, that's when my mouse goes over it, when my cursor goes over it, when my cursor hovers over it. That's the on mouse over event. So if we try, for example, calling the mouse over here, you got what it means right now? It's simply the hovering. The cursor just goes over it. That's the mouse over thing. So whenever I just pass over it, it just increments or just calls this function. Is it clear?
I hope, Isha, you got your answer. Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Andrew.
Perfect. Yeah, anytime. So now we're done with our lesson, which was the introduction to JavaScript. However, a coding session is not a coding session without creating even a small project, isn't it? So that's why we're going to make just a little to-do list using all these concepts we just explained, the DOM manipulation, the event handlers, declaring variables. We're going to create a small project to make sure we just understood all what was explained earlier. And I really hope that some of you would participate in. So I'm going to give you, let's say, 2 to 3 minutes. Everyone, please, or who can, just open a code editor.
Andrew, we have questions in the chat also. The first is,
Oh,
can
yeah.
you please explain the functionality of query selector again?
Yes, sure thing. All right, so Namira, do you actually understand the get element by ID method? Hello. All right. So get element by ID, what it does, it just fetches the first element it finds with the specified ID. So what the query selector does is pretty much the same. So let's try it again. Let's just take out any things. We have one at line 19. Let's take this out. Right. So let's try it as the same. Let's try the same functionality of the get element by ID. Let's name it variable, for example, query whatever. Okay. Just use document.querySelector. Since we want to fetch an element by its ID for now, we're going to start with a hash, this symbol, and just give it its specified ID. So let's try, for example, or let's try ID2. Right. This returned to us this div tag, that one over there, to make sure we can even try printing it. Sure enough, yes, it brought us the div tag that we were looking for, this one. Okay, so up until now, it's the same as get element by ID. Nothing has changed. So let's try fetching an element through its class. We start with a dot or a point, and then we give it its class. So it fetched also another element, which is class 1, which is this one. All right. However, if we take a look right here, we have 4 div tags with the same class C1. Why it only brings us this first one? Because how query selector works is it fetches the first element that satisfies this criteria that query inserted over there. So how do I actually fetch another element? Let's say this one. I am class 3. How I do that is using the query selector all. So let's actually change that to query selector all. And again, fetch the elements with class C1. So what the query selector all does is it scans our whole HTML body for elements with classes like the ones mentioned here. All right. So what it did is it returned to us a node list or an array with 4 div tags, which are these 4 div tags. And they're sorted as follows. This one, the first one is number 0, 1, 2, and 3. All right. So how do I actually fetch, let's say, number 2, this one, the one that has the text, I am class 3. We're going to treat it just as a normal array in any other programming language and just give it an index. That's an index of 2. And sure enough, it gave us only one element, which is this one. I am class 3, which is this one. So is it more clear right now? You're absolutely welcome.
Okay,
All right.
so we have other questions as well.
Yes. So changing the cursor into another icon, that's a CSS thing, I believe, and I don't think we're covering that in this session. Can we update the CSS using JavaScript? Yep, absolutely we can. We're actually going to go through a couple lines while creating our to-do list. So we are going to see exactly how we're going to do that. All right, so everyone has their code editors open? Come on, you can't just attend a programming session without actually doing it by yourself. I'll just give you 2 more minutes. All right. Oh, and by the way, the one who asked that, Kanishak, you asked how many data types does JS have? So the basic answer is 5, which are the strings, numbers, booleans, which are true and false, undefined, and null. Null is basically an empty value, and undefined usually turns when you try, for example, calling a variable that's not existing yet. All right, so I see some people that are ready with their code editors, so amazing, you're welcome. All right, let's start off with our project. So first off, make sure you're in a new directory, preferably an empty one. And we're gonna start with creating a new HTML document, right? And surely enough, we're gonna need another document for JavaScript. I'll just call it to-do.js. Amazing, we're just gonna open that. Okay, so we're gonna start off with the boilerplate, which is the template for HTML. And let's edit the title to be to-do list. Great. So I'm going to need some answers later on, so please, everyone, just stay focused. All right, so before we start with any functionality, let's start with adding our needed elements. So let's go ahead with a header, which has my to-do list. All right. And okay. All right. So let's just give this a styling, just put it in the center. So text. All right. And let's have an h3 tag, which is a smaller header with the text enter a task, for example. Right. Please, if anyone is stuck or needs any help or any assistance, just stop me. All right, so we're gonna have to create it something like this one. So we have here a text box with some placeholder text inside, a couple buttons, and this is an unordered list. So let's start off with the text box. All right, given an input type of text. Let's also put a placeholder inside. A placeholder is that that grade text inside, which is there before you write anything. So let's go with what are we doing today? This kind of text. So if I try typing something inside, it just removes it. All right. We also have a couple buttons over there. Let's give this one the ID of call it the add button and give it the text of add task. Right, let's have another button created for resetting our list. Let's give it the ID of reset button. Okay, great. So now we have it all. We're just missing this unordered list. However, we're not going to add any data. We just learned from JavaScript that we can dynamically update our content. So we're going to start off with an empty list. So let's leave some space and put in here just an unordered list with the ID. Let's name it to-dos. It's not visible since it has no elements. However, if I just add a list item of element 1, there it is. However, just need it empty for now. All right, so everyone caught up till now? All right, so now that we're done with the skeleton of our website, let's not forget to add the script tag to reference our JavaScript sheet.
Excuse me, Andrew.
Yeah.
Please, could you just enlarge your screen so that the people can just have a look over the entire code, because a few of the a few lines are being just being
Oh,
hidden.
sorry. Yes. There
Yeah.
you go.
Perfectly fine.
Okay, you can do that, and there you go. All right, so now that we have our full HTML skeleton for this little app we're creating, let's move on to the JavaScript section. So, okay, so before writing anything, can anyone guess what functions we're gonna need? What JavaScript we're gonna need to write? So if we look again, we have two buttons over there: the add task, the reset list. So, any idea how many functions we're gonna need, or what are they? Okay. So let's start off with adding a task, right? So let's give this one, for example, add to list function, right? And let's go ahead and define it over there. Okay, so step by step. First off, what we need to do is just get the text over from the text box over there. We need to get the text that's entered inside so that we can put it in our list over here. So we're going to start off by getting that list, getting the text, I mean. Let's find it. So we're going to use the element YID. And we had it named to let's name it, for example, text box or something. All right. So next up, we're going to need to create another list item in order to add this text to it. So we're going to try naming it li. So can anyone guess what's the function we're going to use here? We need to create a new element. So what are we going to use?
Create element.
Perfect, thank you. Right, so we're going to start off with creating an element, and we're going to give it the element type of li, because its li is in HTML is a list item. It just goes inside an unordered list or an ordered one to give this this look. This is an li. This is a list item. This one, etc. All right. So after creating a list item, we're going to alter its text. So that's li.inner text, and we're going to change it to that text we just fetched from the text box above. So okay, we're just gonna add here the value just to get our text. That's this value actually. So what if we maybe by printing this value? So there it is. This is the value we're looking for. This is the text we're trying to reach. And if we just leave it empty, it just goes with the empty text because we have nothing written inside. All right. So after that, we just created a new list item. We changed its text. So in order to use it, later on, we're going to have to give it an ID. So we're just going to set an attribute, change its ID to, since we're going to add perhaps multiple tasks, so it wouldn't make sense to just give them all the same ID, like task, for example. Right? So what we're going to do is we're going to just give them the ID of their own text. So let's try doing this. So say, for example, we have this list item here with walk the dog as its text. Its ID would be also walk the dog in order to be easily differentiated between all of them. Right, and last but not least, sure thing, if we just go ahead and take a look now, nothing happens because we still did not add it to our document. So what we need to do is we're gonna, first off, we're gonna define our unordered list. Which we had it named to those, this one. All right, and then we're going to append to it that list item we had. So let's try it. And sure enough, there we have it. That's for starters. Anything unclear till now? All good?
Yep, perfectly fine.
All right. So now that we have actually inserted a list item with the tasks that we want, we still actually have kind of a long way to go. So let's see here. Another thing we have over here are these tasks with some strike through line going through them, which means they're crossed, maybe done or something, or I don't want them anymore. So let's see how could we do that. So for the list item, the one that we just added, that task, we're gonna go with li.add event listener, the one that we just had, right? And just on its click, we're gonna do just exactly as we saw earlier, and start defining its function. So before we start, we're gonna have again to fetch that list item from the document. It's already there. It's already, we have this. So if we try going, maybe adding the book or something, and we go ahead and take a look at our elements. There we have this list item. This is the one that we just inserted with the text reader book, and its ID is the same. So if you continue, we just have its event listener set to clicking. All right. So first off, we're going to have to fetch it. Let's call it the current, because it's the one we're highlighting right now, which we'll use for a document.get element by ID as well, with the ID being the text as we just specified over here. All right. So I think someone asked this question earlier. Yes, Aisha Tanwar. You just asked, can we update the CSS using JavaScript? It's coming up next. So we're going to add a strike through, which is usually written in a CSS file. However, we're going to do this using JavaScript, and we're going to remove it as well. So let's see here. We're going to simply just write it as current.style. Okay. As you can see, it just references the CSS inline styling. Okay. Dot property. This one actually takes, usually just takes two strings. First one being the property we want to set, which in our case is the text decoration. That's a CSS attribute, right? And the second string being its value. So the text decoration has multiple values, one of them being the one that we're looking for, which is the time through. All right. So if we try it right now, let's add something like feed. There you go. You just changed the styling of an element using JavaScript. As you can see, we don't even have a CSS file over here. All right. However, okay, so I can cross an element. However, I can't go back. Let's fix this. So we're going to go simple with just a simple if block. So if current style, and we're going to check its style. So we're going to scroll and we're going to find the text decoration. Okay. If it's already on time through, it's already on line through, we're going to do nothing. We're just going to swap this one with none to just return it as it once was. However, if it's not, so we're using the else, and we're taking this one over here, and we're going to change this one to, I believe that should have it fixed. So let's try it. As we can see, we just click it to cross it and click it to remove that line over it. All right, great. So we've gone through a huge part till now. All right, so let's say I want to maybe remove that element. So I have multiple elements. I want to just remove one of them. Okay, how do I do that? Let's see. So we can actually find a workaround towards this. We could just say if I maybe double click an element or something, it's removed. So let's try that. So let's add another event listener to it. In this case, it's a double click, which is written as dbl click, right? And we're gonna again define function inside of here. We're gonna reference the current document that the current element that we're going to remove, just giving the ID of text, the same element that we used over here. All right. And we're just gonna go with UL, which is this one, which is the unordered list. Dot remove child. Right, so let's try double clicking something. Maybe walk, whatever. Sure enough, it's gone. Amazing. So, okay, so since I give that task an ID of its text, and then I call it by its ID, so what if I actually write an empty string? So what if just do something like that? Okay, so the console says nothing because I did nothing. What if I just try clicking it? It throws an error. Why? Because you're just trying to fetch an element throughout this one. You're trying to fetch an element with ID of an empty string. I mean, no element can have an ID of an empty string. So what we're going to do to avoid this is we're going to try to alert the user that you're entering an empty string. How are we going to do that? Simple. We're just going to add an if statement, right? If our text is an empty string, we're going to just alert them with maybe a message of please enter a task, right? So else, and so let's try it again. And yes, we can't enter anything empty anymore. This works fine. If I try entering something like an empty string, there you go. All right, great. So let's, for the sake of being somewhat more professional, if we just add a task, we want to just remove this text. So let's try this. Let's over here. Let's document. Let's set its value. What was it called? Yeah, text box. Value. Let's get back to how it was. So let's try it again. So if we add a new task, it just goes back empty again. So what's left for us to do is just create this resetting the list function, which is fairly simple. Right, we're going to define a new function, which is named, what did we name it? I think reset. Oh, we did not. So let's call it over here. Let's name it reset list. So what we simply want to do is just fetch that unordered list, the one that's at the bottom over there, and just empty it, remove all of its children. However, that would need a loop, and we just have a more simple approach. We can just fetch it using the, let's use the query selector this time, right? Name to-dos, right? And just give it the let's just empty it to get it how it once was. And for the sake of consistency, let's just take this over here as well to remove what's written in the text box. So if we try adding multiple tasks and just try resetting the list, it just all goes away. So now you have it. That's the to-do list, like the one created right here. I hope you found this beneficial and hope it was worth your time. So by this, I'd just like to wrap up my session and say that I'm done. So anyone has any questions?
If anyone of you have any question, you can just post it in the chat, or you can just turn on your mics and ask. Okay, we have a question, I guess.
Yes, I'm trying to figure it out. Referring to the same string 2 times. That's actually smart. Yes, you're absolutely correct. So you cannot use the ID more than once for for multiple elements. So what we're going to do is just simply change this one to class, right? And where else do we call that? We're going to have this to change to query selector. May just make it a query selector all so that we remove all of them. Or okay, let's try something else. What if we just leave this as it is? Query selector all and try a hash. I'm just going to try to debug that error with you. So if you had multiple elements with the same string, right, so we call both of these. Great. So problem here is this one. Which line? 15. Oh, okay. Yeah, we're gonna have to do it in a for loop. Let's say than the cur dot we have a size here or something. On increment dx. Okay, and if current of x. Let's try it again. There you go. That's what you wanted? Who asked this? I think Ishu. Is it clear right now? Perfect. All right, so any more questions?
Sir, can you explain append child?
Yes, sure thing. All right, so if you go back to our presentation, we have the DOM figure, which represents the whole HTML document. All right. So what appending a child actually does is it brings one of these elements, say an h1 tag, and just puts it right under the body. So let's take a live example. So right here, where was it? This one. So what append child actually did was it took that list item we just created, which in this case is, let's say, the first one, walk the dog. This is a list item, which is an li. All right. So what it did was that it took it and it just appended. Append means to add something or to connect it to something. So it just added this list item to the unordered list, to the list we had. That's what append child actually does. It just connects items together in the form of a tree, just like this figure. Got it?
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
You're absolutely welcome. All right. Any more questions?
So guys, you can freely ask your questions if you have any.
All right, so let's see what Namir has to say. Do we use console log for error handling only? Well, no, not really. You can use it to actually preview. See, remember when I actually tried to see if I fetched or returned the correct element, maybe you can use it for some calculation, for evaluation to a Boolean expression, whether something is true or false. These are multiple uses to the console. It's not only used for error handling. All right? Great. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so if we have two same strings and we want a line through a single string, how can we do that? I'm afraid with this implementation we cannot, because we have them all named with the same ID. So if we want to do that, we have to go through a different implementation. Instead of giving it the ID of a text, we'll have to insert it like some sort of counter or something to give them all some different IDs. All right? To have them all separated from each other. Got it? All right. Any more? Just hold up 1 second. Okay, so any more questions? All right, so since we're done, I wanted to do something from before I even started this session. I'd like to actually give a huge shout out to Ali Higazi, which is our GDSC leader. He's not only a lead, he's a friend, a brother too. And if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be talking here today or giving this workshop. He actually taught me a lot of things, introduced me more to the programming world, and one could say is actually my mentor, got me this far. So I'd like to thank him for everything that he did. Yes, that's it. I'm done.
So yeah, even I would like to thank Ali for all the help that he renders us all the time. He's a guy who is available for your help 24/7. You just ping him and he'll be like, okay, I'm up for a Zoom call. So that's the best thing about him. Had it been
Absolutely
Ali wouldn't
true.
have been there, I don't think I would have ever gotten connection with Andrew. So yeah, it's all because of him. So thank you so much, Ali, for making things work out and acting as a mediator between us. And thank you everyone for joining us for this session. Hope you liked it. Andrew, would you like to say something?
Nope, I'm done.
Okay, perfect.
I hope you all enjoyed it and found it beneficial.
Okay, Andrew, we have our senior with us, Tarun Agarwal. I guess he wants to.
Hello.
Yeah, hi Andrew. Actually, I joined a bit late. I joined very late. I was in office meeting, but I have went to the last part which you were telling, and I must say that you really deliver a really good session. Like
Thanks a lot.
things are really informative for me as well. So this is really great. Yeah, a huge shout out to you and your DSC group.
Thank you very
really
much.
appreciated.
Yes.
And thank you for being
Thanks
a part of DSC ABSIT Bootcamp.
It's my pleasure working with you guys. This session I found it very actually fun to prepare and to give. So thanks for the opportunity as well.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, Andrew. So should we wind up for the day?
I think so, yes.
Okay. So, guys, we'll be winding up for the day. Those of the audience who wish to leave may leave, and those who want to stay back, they can stay.
You're welcome.
Because we are officially over, and now we'll just have our own chit chat sessions. So,
Do
those
we
of the
have
audience-
screenshots for the session?
Yes, yes, we took it.
I think it's recorded as well, so you may find it on YouTube.
Yep.
No, not that kind of screenshots, like with cameras on of everyone and that kind of thing.
Yes, I think
Yeah,
so.
we'll-
I think they took some of them.
We'll be taking it. Okay, Core, could you just please turn on your cameras? If Ali is there, Ali, if you can hear me, please could you turn on your camera as well, if possible?
You're welcome, Namira.
Guys, please turn on your cameras if possible. We'll just take a picture together because that's the only way we can. So,
Why
Ali,
just four? Why just four? All the audience can turn on the cameras. Change the
That's what I
layout.
was-
Yeah.
guys, if you could just turn on your cameras, everyone.
Who all wants to get famous on LinkedIn, you can turn on their cameras. Like LinkedIn is the right place to get famous.
Okay, so Kanish, can you please take a screenshot? Kanish Gupta, are you doing it?
Yeah,
Okay.
I already took a lot of screenshots.
No, you just take one with the, everybody with a smiling face. Okay, just take that.
Bro, you cannot talk on mute.
I just take a screenshot once again. Yeah, thank you everyone.
Okay, thank you so much, Kanish. Okay, hi, Ali is here. Hi, Ali, how are you doing?
Everyone, I just heard you. Thank you very much for your kind words. I'm really humbled by them, and I'm really glad to have gotten to know you guys, work with you guys. It's been a great journey. Thank you.
It's actually great knowing you, Ali. I hope we'll be collaborating in future once everything is set up in your campus as well. Then
Hopefully.
We'll be for sure having some amazing collabs in the future. That's a word you can
Hopefully,
have.
and reach out to me whenever you need to collab again, and I hope we do collab again.
Perfectly fine. I'll just ping you.
Awesome.
Perfectly. Okay. So, I just came across that video of yours. Like you went in that session of Shruti's, na? I just saw it. You
Yeah,
guys actually had fun.
it was a great experience.
You guys had fun. I could make out from the video. You guys had a lot of fun, right?
Yeah, it was great.
Okay, so, hey, what about the onboarding kit? Like, are they delivering it in your country already?
I onboarded lots of people, but we haven't gotten the official, papers done yet. But hopefully, anytime soon.
I was asking about the onboarding kit that they give it to the leads. That one.
Oh
Welcome kit.
no, we haven't received the onboarding kit yet.
People have already
I don't think
received
anyone
it.
needs it has.
No. People have already received it. Like a guy from Taiwan, he just received it. I'll send you the pic.
Really nice.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we get ours soon.
We will. Keep your hopes high, but not too high.
Yeah.
As well. I hope you get the punch.
I hope so.
Okay. So, okay, Ali, I would just like you to know my core. So, one by one, I'll begin. First of all, let me just open the chat so that I can just go. We have Aman Singer, who manages the PR team. Then we have Ashutosh Pandey. Ashutosh is basically in the ventures team. Ventures team is responsible for getting the hands-on projects made, to keep a watch over the people if they're doing the projects or not, and to help them out. Then we have Kanishk Chaurasia. Kanishk is mainly responsible for keeping up all the data, the records of the members and all. He does the record keeping. Then we have our very own designer, the one who designs all the posters. The one who designed the poster for you, Andrew. He is Kanish Kumar Gupta. Just raise your hand, guys, once. Just say a hi like this. Okay. So
Yeah, I like that poster. Thanks a lot.
Then we have, we have Satyarth. So we have Kumar Satyarth as well. He is our previous lead and our mentor as well. Even Tarun sir is a great mentor. Then coming to Pari. Pari is also part of the ventures team. You both know her very well already. So, okay, coming to Saloni. Saloni also, Andrew knows Saloni, I guess. Okay. So,
Yeah.
Saloni is a part of the management team, that is the executive team. She manages all the work of the management. Then coming to Satyam. Satyam is the part of the tech team. Then we have Aruj. Aruj is the one who designs all the amazing videos that you see on Instagram. He's the one behind all those amazing videos. Then we have Ayush as well. Ayush is the guy who manages the PR work and any sort of work you want to. Like, Ayush, just raise your hand. Like, any
Hello,
work
sir.
you want to get done, Ayush is the guy. Not only related to GDSC, any sort of work. So, if you guys, get stuck anywhere, just ping him. He'll give you the best possible advice, okay? Then we have Prakhar. He's the part of the tech team and he manages the jobs of the tech team as well. So yeah, that's my core, and that's my playing 11. That's what I call them. So yeah.
It's a pleasure to meet you all.
Yeah, we do.
So
It's a pleasure for us, Ali.
So I will just let you know, I'm just figuring out things. I'm planning an event that will have international collaborations. Like I'm targeting leads from different continents so that we at least have one lead from each continent. So like, we'll be collaborating for it. And yes, Ali, I'll be needing you for our event for UI UX. Now you cannot deny, okay? This time you'll have to come. For sure. I'm not going to take any excuses this time. For sure, we'll do it.
For sure.
Okay.
Just ping me.
Like I was planning to, even invite Erica Hansen if she wishes to. We can try out there as well. Yeah. So we'll have this collab for sure. We'll invite Shruti also, okay? So anyone wants to say something? Andrew already looks so exhausted.
I mean, it was a long session, but it was fun nonetheless.
It was actually a long one, like 2 hours. I was actually getting worried, like looking at him. I was like, okay, this guy is already exhausted. I
It's
could
okay.
make it out. I could
It's
make it
alright.
out. So, anybody wants to say anything?
Yes, Adya, I have one doubt. You guys live in Egypt, so how come your university name is the German University?
Good question.
Well, it's sometimes European countries love to open their own universities in other countries. So German university is German university that's based in Egypt. We get the chance to travel and study in Germany actually if we like to. So
Adya, do we have any type of
German
university like American University or any other countries named in the university?
yeah. We have an American university, we have a British university, and the Canadian university.
Okay, so I guess like your country has universities of all the different countries, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys just got a lot of opportunities, I must say.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
It's actually great to have all those people. Like, are like people from outside also come and study there? Is it like that?
Sometimes, yeah, we've got lots of Korean people in our college. So yeah, but it depends on the area because some colleges would have Americans actually studying there, Korean people. I know Spanish people studying in Egypt.
Okay, so I got it. It's something like we in India have Indian Institute of Technologies, like IITs. They're pretty much famous. So there we have people from outside who come and study. Like mostly the colleges and universities which are from the government, not in the private ones. Mostly they are the aided or the government ones, most probably.
Yeah. Same here.
Anybody in the call who wants to say anything else or want to ask them something?
Yeah, Andrew, you shout out, man. Did a great session.
Thanks a
Wonderful.
lot. I appreciate that.
Andrew, like I must say, this boot camp has been running since I guess past 1 week. We have already hosted. This was the 4th session of the boot camp, and this one was the most interactive one, to be honest.
Oh,
The most interactive session of all. Like our audience, I was thinking, like, is this the same audience? Like these guys didn't even speak a word in the past few sessions. Like, how are they interacting so much? That was something that I was even surprised with. I was like, wow, this is amazing. So
I mean,
yeah,
tried my best.
this
So,
guy got something.
yeah.
Okay, I'll use him wisely. This guy already has something. Use him like anything. Okay, he's a part of your core, right?
Yeah, Andrew stayed like the whole night yesterday till like 4 a.m. preparing the workshop. He's an extremely hard worker. This guy is just something else.
That's all.
Thanks a lot. Seriously.
Okay, then even I have two people synonymous to Andrew, the ones who are available on both its sides. Like I don't think if you guys have the same setup. So Pari and Prakhar. Like in this boot camp, we actually faced a lot of issues. Like somebody fell ill and somebody had a mishap in the family. So like I was like, how is this going to work out anyhow? But these two literally pulled it off so well, especially the entire team. But these two literally pulled it off quite well.
Thanks a lot. I'd like to say just one last thing.
Yeah, sure.
So a hidden soldier right there in the attendees. His name is Kyrillos Victor. That guy stayed up with me last night, helping me with the rehearsals and stuff, and just kept some company till I actually was finished. Helped me actually rehearse it once or twice to make sure it was going off fine, the timing was correct and stuff. So yeah, shout out to the guy as well.
Thank you so much for helping out Andrew so that our session could be a success. Thank you so much. Okay, guys, should we wind up or guys want to sit and chit chat?
I'm done.
Okay, he's already exhausted. So we guys can just wind up. And we have Satyar sir. I am just puzzled he did not speak anything. Satyar sir, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here sleeping. Sorry, man. Sorry, actually, I'm a little bit tired, so
it's all
I
right.
was sleeping.
Got it.
Yeah, yeah, but I attended the whole event, and Andrew, you are like amazing. The whole event was great. The way you were explaining the JavaScript logics to everyone and solving the doubts, that was cool. And also the audience were interacting very much. So
yeah, I like that very much. Thanks
and
a lot, guys, by the way.
I agree with Adya. Like in the previous session, no one was able even putting their question in the chat box. But here, like people are opening their mic and asking you question directly. So that was a good part. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to all of the attendees. They were actually great, interacting, asking questions in the chat, even speaking them out loud in mics. They were just amazing. They helped a lot.
Yes, exactly. And hey, Ali, how are you?
Hey, I'm great. How are you?
Yeah, doing great, man. So nice to see you here. So you are the DSC lead, right? Current DSC lead.
Yes.
And Andrew is your core member. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And Kyrillos Victor, who is he?
He's a friend of mine. He's a
friend of
really
ours.
old friend of mine. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a great guy, honestly.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hey, hi, Victor. I hope he can speak. Yeah, no issue. Just wanted to say hi. Hope you are well. Yeah, guys. Okay, so.
Okay, sir. Thank you for joining us. Okay, guys, should we wrap
I don't think
up?
his mic's working, so yeah.
I got it. No worries. So, guys, should we wrap up?
I think so.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Andrews. Thank you, Ali, for joining us.
Thank you.
It was
Most welcome.
really a
Been great
pleasure
working with
knowing
you
you.
guys.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Ali.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank
अच्छा आद्या, कल फीडबैक फॉर्म सर्कुलेट करवाया था क्या?
सर अभी नहीं कराया, वो थोड़ा सा काम में लगे थे दूसरे, तो इन लोग के साथ लग गए थे, तो भूल गए थे, अभी करवा देंगे।
ओके
सलोनी, आर यू देयर? सलोनी,
या
सलोनी,
हाँ,
ठीक है,
हाँ।
वो उसका मैसेज ड्राफ्ट कर देना एंड आई सर्कुलेट इट, ठीक है?
नहीं प्लीज अब सलोनी को मत कहो यार। बेचारी लगी पड़ी है, कोई और को देखो।
तो सर मैं क्या करूं, मैं कहाँ जाऊं? अच्छा
अरे
रुको, मैं
ठीक है
बोलती हूँ
यार,
किसी
तुम्हारा बनता है, तुम लीड हो।
सत्यार्थ लिख के देगा भाई, आपकी बार मैसेज
हाँ
होगा।
हाँ
सर लिख के देंगे। हाँ
सत्यार्थ
हम
कंटेंट राइटिंग में अलग है भाई, अलग लेवल पे।
हम लिख देंगे ना तो भाग जाओगे लो। बस मैं ग्रामरली यूज करता हूँ, जितना वो सजेस्ट कर दे उतना सही करता हूँ।
तो कौन लिखेगा? कनिष्क, तुम लिख दोगे? कनिष्क
हम
कुमार
लिख देंगे,
गुप्ता,
हम लिख देंगे।
ले
वो लिख देगी, ठीक है? लाइक आप मेरी कोर को ऐसे मत बोलो, इतनी काम वाम करने वाले सब लोग हैं।
किसी को उतनी इंग्लिश कहाँ समझ में आई है यार, कौन ग्रामर देख रहा है तुम्हारा?
ये बात है। अच्छा वैसे आज थोड़ा सा मतलब पार्टिसिपेंट्स कम थे, काफी कम थे, मतलब
हाँ
अगर
सर, ये मुझे भी थोड़ा सा समझ में नहीं आया कि व्हाई डिड दिस हैपन, बट
चलो कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, वो चीज रहती है। अभी मेरे को एक का जूनियर का फोन आता है, वो भी यही चीज कह रहा था कि जावास्क्रिप्ट पढ़ना है। तो मैंने उसे कहा कि भाई अभी बूट कैंप चल रही है, वो तो कह रहा है भैया उसी में था, बस थोड़ा सा मेरे को समझ में नहीं आ रहा था, वो इंग्लिश उनकी मतलब एसेंट नहीं समझ में आ रहा था, तो मैंने लीव कर दिया। तो मैंने कहा हाँ ये डाउट मतलब ये चीज तो जेन्युइन रीजन है, मतलब कि मतलब कई लोग को नहीं समझ में आती है, तो कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, लेकिन अच्छा था। बाकी
बताइए क्या करें आप, बताइए। अगर इंग्लिश में बोलते हैं तो वो भी दिक्कत होती है, अगर हिंदी में बोलते हैं तो भी प्रॉब्लम होती है।
अरे नहीं नहीं
कहाँ
नहीं नहीं
जाए हम लोग,
नहीं,
कहाँ जाए?
अरे नहीं, एक्चुअली वो चीजें सही होंगी यार, लाइक विद टाइम,
सही
और
हो
एक्सेंट का फर्क पड़ता है।
सर ज्यादातर दो
बट इन लोग का लाइक मुझे
क्या क्या भाई क्या?
लैंग्वेज बैरियर आ जाता है।
एको हो रहा है कनिष्क, बहुत ज्यादा एको हो रहा है। एक बार लीव करके दोबारा ज्वाइन करूँ?
अरे कोई नहीं, मतलब अच्छा था, मतलब
वो चीजें सही हो जाएंगी यार।
एग्जैक्टली
सेशन अच्छा गया कल का मतलब सीरियसली मेरे लिए, मतलब मैं ऑनेस्ट अपना फीडबैक दूं तो मेरे लिए थोड़ा सा बहुत ऊपर चला गया वो, बिकॉज आई एम नॉट अ सीएसएस गाय, तो मेरे लिए सीएसएस बहुत ज़्यादा हो गई थी। बट आई थिंक मतलब काफ़ी कुछ मैंने भी सीखा उस सेशन से, आज के से भी सीखा, मेरे को जावास्क्रिप्ट भी उतनी नहीं आइडिया है, तो हाँ
हाँ कुछ चीजें मुझको भी नहीं पता थी, वो आज मेरे को समझ में आया।
यस,
चीजें सीखते रहना चाहिए भाई।
वो ज़रूरी है भाई, पता नहीं कब किस मोड़ पे फ्रंट एंड करना पड़ता है।
नहीं आद्या उसकी टेंशन ना लो, अच्छा था। मतलब देखो जिनको नहीं समझ में आ रही है ना, मतलब अगर तुमको कोई तुम्हारे पास कोई आता है ये कहता है कि मेरे को नहीं समझ में आई, इंग्लिश नहीं समझ आई, तो उसको कहो कि तुम और सेशन करो, जितना ज्यादा सेशन करोगे उतना ज्यादा तुमको क्लियर होगा। वो उस चीज से भागने से तो कभी नहीं समझ में आएगी ना
यार अच्छा दूसरी चीज़ क्या है, मान लो मैं कह रहा हूँ ठीक है पूरा समझ नहीं आया, बट एटलीस्ट आई गेट कीवर्ड्स ना, तो आई कैन सर्च फॉर कीवर्ड्स एंड आई कैन गेट टू नो मोर इन हिंदी ऑल्सो। मतलब यार मेरे को अगर मान लो अपेंड चाइल्ड मिल गया, मेरे को नहीं समझ में आया अपेंड चाइल्ड उन्होंने क्या बताया, मैं उसको जाके यूट्यूब पे डाल के हिंदी में समझ सकता हूँ।
और यार 2 बार रिस्टार्ट मारना पड़ा।
चलो गाइस मैं लीव करता है, मेरा एक कॉल है, बाय बाय।
ओके भैया, जाइए रिस्टार्ट करिए। 2 बार सही यार मेरा इसी टाइम वो भी हो जाता है, क्या कहते हैं स्टैंड अप रहता है।
पवन सर भी नहीं आ पाए।
हाँ मतलब अरे अब फाइनल ईयर वाले सब हैं, वो तो पता नहीं तरुण भैया क्या हैं, वो जब देखो तब आ जाते हैं। उनको तो मैं ऐसे ही बोलता हूँ कि क्या है भैया कोई काम धंधा नहीं है आपको, जब देखो तब आ जाते हैं आप।
आने दीजिए, कल तो देवराज भैया भी आए थे थोड़ी देर के लिए।
हाँ वही है यार, मतलब सब कोई मतलब इंगेज रहता है, जो जो मतलब निकल पाता है आ जाता है, वो चीज़ है। कल को तुम्हारे साथ भी होगा।
हमारे साथ तो पता ही नहीं क्या होगा, हमें तो खुद नहीं पता हमारे साथ क्या होगा।
अरे हो जाएगा, सब हो जाएगा।
भाइयों कैसे हो सब लोग, ठीक हो, खुश हो?
हाँ बढ़िया।
नहीं
ये वाला
काफी
सेशन एकदम प्रॉपर
सही।
है, मतलब टाइम के बेसिस पे अगर बोले तो।
मुझे इसका वो थोड़ा सा समझ नहीं आया